Something of the home life of Titian must be known, in order to understand the loving care which he bestowed upon this portrait of his daughter Lavinia. The painter's works were in such demand that he could afford to live in a costly manner. He had a true Venetian's love of luxury, and liked to surround himself with elegant things. His society was sought by rich noblemen, and he himself lived like a prince. When somewhat over 50 years of age, Titian removed to a spot just outside Venice in the district of Biri, where he laid out a beautiful garden. The view from Casa Grande, as the house was called, was very extensive, looking across the lagoon to the island of Murano and the hills of Ceneda. Here Titian entertained his guests with lavish hospitality. A distinguished scholar of that time, one Priscianese, who had come to Venice in 1540 to publish a grammar, describes how he was entertained there. Before the tables were set out, he writes, we spent the time in looking at the lively figures in the excellent pictures, of which the house was full, and in discussing the real beauty and charm of the garden. In the meanwhile came the hour for supper, which was no less beautiful and well arranged than copious and well provided. Besides the most delicate viands and precious wines, there were all those pleasures and amusements that are suited to the season, the guests, and the feast. The sea, as soon as the sun went down, swarmed with gondolas adorned with beautiful women, and resounded with the varied harmony of music, of voices and instruments, which till midnight accompanied our delightful supper. The darling of this beautiful home at Casa Grande was the painter's daughter Lavinia, and the portrait shows how she looked in 1549. Her mother had died before the removal of the family to Biri, and the aunt, who had since tried to fill the vacant place, died about the time this portrait was painted. A new responsibility had therefore fallen upon the young girl, and she was now her father's chief consolation. It is thought that the picture was painted for Titian's friend Argentina Pallavicino of Reggio. As a guest at our father's house, this gentleman must often have seen and admired the charming girl, and the portrait was a pleasant souvenir of his visits. Lavinia is seen carrying a silver salver of fruit, turning as she goes to look over her shoulder. The open country stretches before her, and it is as if she were stepping from a portico of the house to the garden terrace to bring the fruit to some guest. She is handsomely dressed, as her father would like to see his daughter. The gown is of yellow flowered brocade, the bodice edged with jewelled cording. Over the neck is thrown a delicate scarf of some gauzy stuff, the ends floating down in front. An ornamental gold tiara is set on the wavy auburn hair. An earring hangs from the pretty ear, and a string of pearls encircles the neck. Imagine the figure against a deep red curtain, and you have in mind the whole colour scheme of this richly decorative picture. Lavinia, however, would be attractive in any dress. With her fresh young beauty and simple unconscious grace. Her features are not modelled in classic lines. The charm of the face is its fresh colour, the pretty curves of the plump cheek, and, above all, the sweet, open expression. The hands are delicate and shapely, as of one well-born and gently reared. Lavinia is perhaps not a very intellectual person, but she has a sweet, sunny nature and is full of life and spirits. It would seem impossible to be sad or lonely in her cheery company. She holds her precious burden high with an air of triumph, and turns with a smile to see it duly admired. The delicious fruit certainly makes a tempting display. The girl's innocent round face and arch pose remind one of a playful kitten. The painter has chosen a graceful and unusual attitude. The curves of the outstretched arms serve as counterbalancing lines to the main lines of the figure. The artist himself was so pleased with the pose that he repeated it in another picture, where Lavinia assumes the gruesome role of Salome and carries in her salver, in place of the fruit, the head of St. John the Baptist. A few years after our portrait was painted, Lavinia was betrothed to Cornelio Sarcinelli of Serravalle, and a new portrait was painted in honor of the event. When the marriage settlement was signed, Lavinia brought her husband a dowry of 1,400 ducats, a royal sum in those days. The wedding was on the 19th of June, 1555. Some years after her marriage, Lavinia again sat to her father for her portrait. Her beauty, as we have noted, was not of a lasting kind, and in the passing years her fresh colour faded, and she became far too stout for grace. Yet the frank nature always made her attractive, and it is pleasant to see in the kindly face the fulfilment of the happy promise of her girlhood.